Hey friend, welcome back to the Adventure Film Academy show. That feels fantastic to actually say in earnest, in real life. My goal with this podcast is to create a resource to help you finish things that you're proud of. That's what I'm trying to do. And I want a space to be able to have more conversations about how pumped I am on adventure filmmaking and just dive into the weeds because this experience is so isolating and I want more people close to me that I can talk to this stuff about with. So specifically today, we're going to talk about studios and give you an update on the black hole that I feel I fell into in the last 3 years. I think that this is relevant because so much of this has to do with actually being in a healthy place to make. And now that I've been at this for 15 years, I'm learning that this is very much intricate balance between being both, there's sprint elements to it, but then it's also very much a marathon. And trying to learn that dance of when to push hard and when to pull back has been very hard for me in the last 4 years, especially as I'm trying to transition into this next phase of my life where I'm a father now and I want to be a great dad. So this has kind of put me in a spot where I've been thinking about this a lot. And I think there's some takeaways that I wish younger me could hear myself talk about. And I think that's kind of the hope that I'm trying to bring to this discussion a little bit. Mainly because there's been mistakes. And I think if I could learn from these mistakes, I would be better for it. There's no way to get around time on the computer being a massive part about what we do as filmmakers, creators, people that make videos of any kind. And I've been quite wrong about the way that I've gone about this at different chapters and taken the wrong lessons away. So I was so wrong about not ever wanting a studio. That used to be a point of pride for me. Pride in a sense of, hey, I can save money by not renting an extra space and I can just edit out of a closet. I can just edit out of my van. And I took for granted how incredibly productive I could be editing videos out of my van. Without question, those were the most creatively productive time in my life. And as life goes on, I mean, I bought the van in 2015, so that's now close to 10 years. And many of my favorite things were made out of my production van. I bought an old delivery van for $8,000 and moved into it the next day as a metal shell of a van and immediately started editing videos out of that on my laptop. And that experience, I was at a time in my life where I was a bachelor, I was alone, and I could work however long I wanted for however long I wanted to. And I left that, in a sense, once, well, that period of being a lot of work getting done in the van carried on for quite a while in my life. And I took away the wrong lessons about why that worked so well. And that held me back, especially as I've tried to transition out of this insanely productive time in my life, which was the time in the van. So to give you an example of something that went disastrously wrong, I think most creatives can imagine that perfect picturesque retreat in a cabin in the woods as they're on a creative retreat and they're getting that project done. And when I tell you I fantasized about that being a possibility for me, I mean it in earnest. I often felt, man, if I could just get away from the day-to-day stresses, if I could just get a little bit of time to work on my own project, if I could just get alone in a cabin in the woods, all of the blocks I feel I'm facing with my creative projects would just melt away and I would just get them done. Because that's, I guess, what we're specifically talking about here when you have a project that you want to get done and you're not. If you're currently setting your sights on finishing something and you are actually getting the work done and it feels like it's effortless, then congrats. Don't change anything. Just keep going. I feel like that's what I stumbled into when I was editing videos out of my van. I could just do it. And then what I learned 5 years into that is, hey, this is actually really, really hard to keep going. And when I was out of the van editing environment, I really struggled to find my stride. And I fantasized about being in a cabin in the woods so I could work on my big projects. We had just come back from Alaska. We did this massive road trip, my wife and I, and we were going to settle down on Vancouver Island for a season and slow down. And we had a small cabin at our disposal. And while my wife was working, I was editing out of a cabin. And when I tell you this was the biggest contrast between optimism and disappointment that I think I've experienced in my working life, I was so optimistic about getting so much done in this environment. And it was maybe week 2 where I realized, oh no, I hate this. This is going so bad. All I had was my internal thoughts. It was just me against myself. And it was probably the worst environment for me to be creatively productive that I've encountered in a very, very long time. I didn't know it at the time why I was finding it so hard. I thought I was thinking, man, maybe I'm just avoiding the work, which was kind of true. But I didn't really narrow in on why I found it so incredibly difficult. Because I think if we can stack the deck in our favor to make resistance against creating be less, we should totally do that. And then the flip side of that is sometimes we unintentionally stack the deck against us. So instead of stacking it in our favor, we're actively doing decisions that will hold us back without even realizing it. And it took me a year of therapy to unpack why I resented myself for not being able to show up. I had an entire 8-month window in a cabin, and I produced a fraction of what I had imagined. And my mental experience through that was pretty brutal. And when I first was doing therapy as an adult, that was one of the things that ended up coming up was I was just so disappointed that it felt like I couldn't perform anymore. It felt like I'd lost my mojo, and I was just so crushed. And I was reflecting on this experience of being in a cabin in the woods. And my therapist said to me, like, Levi, I cannot think of a single worst environment for you to be creatively productive. And that came as a shock to me because I think a lot of people aspire to the idea of a writing cabin. And she said to me, you need an environment that has stimulus, challenge, and novelty. Stimulus, challenge, novelty. And in the cabin environment, it was novel for the first week. But by day 7, 8, 9, when I woke up in the morning, I knew exactly what my day was going to be like. And there was nothing new, surprising, or interesting. There was nothing stimulating. I was in a quiet cabin in the woods. And there certainly wasn't anything challenging about the environment, at least in the ways that I would have liked. And once I left the cabin experience, my daughter was born. We were in the peak of our lockdown work from home experience. And this was a phase where I also really struggled to be productive. And it was easy at this time because I just poured all my energy into the kids. Having a daughter and then 13 months later having a son, that was a convenient outlet for me to invest myself wholeheartedly into that experience. And I did. And that's good that I did because my creative output completely tanked. I was not performing creatively. I think if we look at my output across the last 3 years, you'll kind of get a sense that my output has decreased dramatically. And part of that is from a practicality standpoint where I've done a little bit more production work. So last year specifically, I took on a client project for the entirety of the year. So I produced a 12-part web series for a client, and it was a massive undertaking. I filmed 28 different interviews that were 45 minutes long each and had to be edited down into 3 interviews per 12-minute episode. It was a monster project. And I thought at the time when I took on this project that I'd be able to do multiple things at once. This seems to be a lesson that I don't learn very well, which is I am not capable of doing 2 things at once well, especially if it's a big project, especially if it's editing. So if we circle back to having the kids, I was working from home, and that was kind of a point of pride where it's like, hey, we've got this home base set up and I'm saving money by not renting a studio. when I worked with Casey Neistat in New York City, that was one of my big lessons that I took away from him. Was he just talked about how much he realized he did not like managing people. And so one of my biggest pushbacks throughout my kind of filmmaking trajectory is I do not want to start a studio and have a building and be paying people to work there. I don't want to manage people. I don't want to have a massive bill every month for salaries for multiple people that my production company is responsible for. I don't want that. I don't want a team of 5. I don't want a big building. I don't want all of this extra stuff, because then we have to take on enough client projects to pay for it. And that to me sounds like my worst nightmare. I do not want to have to take on so much work that I continually have to foot a $30,000 bill for everyone's livelihood each month. And that was something that I knew right out of the gate. I knew I didn't want to grow a team. And you can look back in some of my videos from 2016 where I'm talking about, oh yeah, I don't want to run a team. I just want to be kind of, doing my own thing and then work with contractors. And like, that's kind of been my style. And meeting Casey and filming with him, that kind of affirmed that for me, where it's like, hey, here's someone that I at least relate to in part. And he's talking about how much that was a drain on him creatively to look after other people, and how he didn't feel his skill set was best suited in that. And I felt similarly. And so a part of that is, why rent a big space? Why rent a studio if it's just you? Like, you don't need space. You don't need stuff. Just do it from a laptop at a table in your basement suite. Like, what are you thinking? Why do you need to spend all that extra money? Because if you save the money, then you can go spend it on your projects. Like, that is literally verbatim my message for years. And I think that's a very adequate message, especially in the starting stage where there is absolutely no money to spare. There is no money being made from the videos you're making. So you certainly cannot justify investing in a studio space. But I mean, I've been doing this as my full-time thing since 2016, and part-time as my main job for then the 6 years prior to that. So like, we're making money with video. Like, that's what I do with it as a job. And then I also like making my own films. Those two things happen at the same time. And I don't want the desire to make videos for money to overpower my ability to just go make whatever I want to make. So I don't like the idea of increasing my expenses. I don't like the idea of being locked into a lease, paying rent in a space just because I don't need it. I can just go off in the van. That's what I kept telling myself. And there was a distinct phase when my son was about 6 months. So I'd been a new dad now for 19 months. And I started to realize I'm getting nothing done. And when I try to get things done, it's incredibly stressful. For me, working out of the home environment, it was almost impossible. Anytime I heard a single sound from the other room, my attention would be pulled out of whatever I was working on. And I felt the need that I had to go help. And as much as we had a awesome structure going back and forth between Janelle, my wife, and I, that sounded like I said multiple people. My wife, Janelle, and I, we had a great thing going. She was supporting me to get back into work fully invested, but yeah, I was struggling. And it was through this therapy experience where I realized, I got to get out of this. I got to get out of this scenario. Like, I thought I was saving money. The amount of money I burned from being unproductive, and then the mental health impact of that, where my self-talk towards myself about being unproductive was so destructive. So I started looking for a place to rent. I did not want to pay a lot of money. And I just saw I needed a place outside of my house. I just need a place to set up my desk. And this is where I started making my first mistake. I did not take lessons away from what worked so well in my era in the van. I did not ask myself, man, what works so well about editing out of the van? And then extrapolate from that. I just thought, I don't need much space. I just need a space for a desk. Let's just do a desk somewhere. And where I ended up being the perfect storm for me of chaos, in the sense that I was in a co-work space where there was individual offices, which was good because I needed to put my hard drives and my computers and my monitors somewhere. So I needed a setup. But the walls were paper thin, And out of that co-work space, someone was running a counseling practice. So while I was sitting there at my computer trying to edit videos, I would hear therapy through the wall. Some gross violations of HIPAA going on there. Actually, is there HIPAA in Canada? I don't know what it's called up here. But yeah, that's not a healthy thing to do for the counseling practice. And it certainly wasn't healthy for me because I'm in a basically locked in an office. And what started to happen was anytime I would come into my office wing, a door would open and a therapist's head would poke out because they would think one of their clients is arriving. And then when they would see it was me, they'd kind of like have this look of annoyance. Like my presence in this space was not welcome, was not needed, was not wanted. And I mean, you can think that, oh, just like get over that. But the accumulative stress of just feeling like my presence in my place of creative work is not welcome just really started to grind me down. And I just kept thinking, man, you just got to get over it. Like, just put your headphones on. It's fine. Turns out wearing headphones for 8 hours a day kind of sucks. So I like editing with speakers. I like taking my headphones off. And my decision was kind of made for me when things started getting stolen, aside from the fact that there's a sketchy therapy practice running out of there. And I mean, it was tough because I had a 1-year commitment there. I had a year-long lease. And I started to ask myself, okay, we have to get out of here. It's not going well. But what does my new space need? Like what do we need for Levi to be creatively productive for hopefully years going forward? Because again, there's no way around my life, including a lot of sitting down and editing. And I've experienced many months back to back of that being of manifesting the worst experience for me possible, forcing myself trying to do this and failing. My relationship with editing has been so brutal, yet so required for my work. And I was putting all the blame on myself, just my brain, just, oh man, if only you could just be more disciplined, if only you could be more motivated, if only you could be more like so-and-so. And again, I was thinking back to what my therapist had said about the cabin experience. And she had said, stimulus, novelty, and challenge. That's an environment where my brain thrives. Being an ADHD person, that's just a fact. That's just the toolkit that the brain that I've got to deal with. And I got to stop trying to force myself to exist in a way that I see other people existing. I need to ask myself, okay, what worked well for me in the past? And I thought back to the van experience, like, why did I enjoy editing out of the van so much? And the reason why I liked it is that every day I was parking in a new spot. It was the literal definition of novelty. Every single day I could be in a new location. Every single day there was something new. I was editing out of East Vancouver for a while, and it was just so stimulating to have that as my home base and to be able to like be in this thriving city environment. And so that's the novelty. The stimulus, well, it's like one of my favorite things to do is to take the laptop into a coffee shop and edit. I did a ton of coffee shop editing while I edited out of the van. So I didn't just sit in the van for 8 hours a day. I would go to coffee shops, grab a drip, sit there, use their internet, and edit. And my editing sessions in a coffee shop were massively productive, the most productive. Put on the headphones in a city where no one knows you and just edit. It was amazing, especially if you sit in a desk where other people can see your screen and they can see that you're not on Twitter, not on Facebook, not burning time on YouTube. You're actually doing something like that. Social accountability aspect to me was just thriving. And I loved the challenge of trying to fit in my work so that way I could go do the things I like doing. I liked the idea of, hey, let's get this done so I can go on a hike. Let's get this done so I can go shoot something, so I can go film something. And so thinking about the utter failure of my studio last year. So I had this doc series to edit. And this is one of the hardest editing experiences I've had, where editing these 12 episodes was so mentally draining. And I fought so hard to get them done. And I got absolutely nothing else done in my life over that time. It's why my creative output and productivity on my YouTube channel, Levi Allen, just like completely fell through the floor. It just completely disappeared. And I mean, I'm okay with the YouTube creating experience being something that ebbs and flows over time. That's fine with me. But this was really hard because I still wanted to be making, and I felt like I couldn't. That was just that was such a struggle. And I was thinking, okay, these are the aspects about editing in a van that made me feel superhuman. And when my daughter was 4 months old, Janelle and I drove our van across Canada, and we visited my friend Jesse and Christoph and Josh in what they called, it wasn't this at the time, but it turned into Evil Empire. And they kind of had this hub of creatives that all worked out of the same space. And I remember stepping into that environment for 2 weeks and just feeling such a sense of loss that I didn't have something like that where I lived. That felt so sad for me. Of course, I thought through the idea, okay, like how do we move to Hamilton? And I'm probably not going to move to Hamilton. But I was like, man, there isn't people over here that I can do that with. Like, I don't know enough people that want to rent a massive warehouse together and create a creative hub. And I put the feelers out there of like, man, I need to find a new space. My stuff keeps getting stolen. And the new owner of the bike shop that I worked at in high school, like I would go on walks from my old studio, and I'd walk over to the gym down the road. It was like a 5-minute walk. And I'd love to just stop in the shop to see people. I'm such an extrovert, which is so ironic that I spend so much of my time alone editing videos. But I'm just a massive extrovert. And so I would go on these walks. I'd walk into the bike shop and just chat away. And it was so fun for me to do that. And Dave, the new owner, he bought the shop long after I worked there. I made this video over on the main YouTube channel, this studio tour video. It's like a new studio tour, 15 years in the making. And in the first 30 seconds of the video, I kind of point to this massive building behind me and allude to the fact that, hey, like that's my studio. And then I obviously show you inside pretty quick and show you that it's a bike shop. And it's a kind of a magnum opus coming of age experience that I crafted this studio tour into, because I just could not help myself feeling so incredibly nostalgic to be in the same shop that I worked at and bought some of my first camera gear. And like, I have memories wrenching on bikes at the very bike stands here and thinking about how to rig a cable cam, thinking about how to mount batteries onto some pieces of aluminum that I was drilling together so that way I could power this DIY monitor setup. Like that is what I spent so much, like this kinesthetic work experience to me, I've missed so much. And I despise that part of filmmaking where I have to spend so much time at a computer. I just despise it. Because I love working with my hands. Like I miss it so much when I have to spend time behind the computer for days and days on end, for weeks and weeks and months, and what sometimes feels like years and years on end. And I was talking with Dave about how bad my place was going, and he said, hey dude, you should move into our new shop. And I was just seeing him build, like I saw the walls go up and I'm like, dude, this is awesome. Like, how would that even work? And then he brought it up again and I'm like, Dave, are you kidding me? Like you can't make a joke like that if you're not serious. And he's like, no, I'm not kidding at all. I just would want to make sure that it works for you. So I walked into where we are now, and he showed me these upper balcony mezzanines. And he's like, well, could you just be in one of the corners here? I was like, yeah, I could be in one of the corners. This is so much space. Like this is so much more space than I ever had anywhere before. Like my last place was a 10 by 10 foot box. And I was trying to hold myself back from the excitement because I started to realize, man, if I could just be in an environment where people were on a week to week basis, I had a hunch that would just help my mental health as a creator so much. Like the stimulus of seeing people is just so important. And I just was like, man, this is going to be incredible if we can make this work. And it did. So it took 3 months longer, 4 months longer than he would, like the timeline. Whenever you're making a new building, there's delays. So they ran into their own sort of delays. And I was just sitting, waiting at home because I had to move out of my last place in January. So I didn't have a studio again for 4 months. And so I got to move into here a couple months ago, and there's some pieces that needed to be finished. Like we had to get internet hooked back up. There's like some stuff that needed to be finished, But this is the first month where it's felt like the studio is operational and we're back. We're back. And this happens to me so much in life where I feel this wave of optimism. And now as a 30-year-old, I'm skeptical of my optimism because this thing happens where I start to feel like, man, anything's possible. Why did I ever find this hard before? Why did I ever find editing hard before? Why did I ever find creating hard before? Like anything's possible. Let's just crush it. Let's just crank out the finished projects. And I'm feeling that optimism right now. And I'm nervous because I've felt that before and it hasn't worked out. And it's ended up becoming way harder than I expected. And things have gone wrong and it's gone bad. But in this instance, I'm assessing the week-to-week life here. And I've had some bad weeks in the last couple months. I've had some really bad weeks. And yet being able to come to this space and see people and then follow the ebbs and flows of just a normal workday life. Like it's so ironic to me that I've worked so hard to be able to have complete control over my schedule, over my plans, my life, my day-to-day. But then the irony is that when I have that full control, I just fill it almost entirely with work. And for years and years, that was very productive because that wasn't a problem, right? Like that's what I wanted to be doing. That's what I love doing. So I'd basically work and then spend time with Janelle. Like that's the two things I did. I had sold my mountain bikes. I didn't do things for fun except make things. And that was fun. That was good. But that's not real life in the long term. And I needed to pivot to this new experience where I had kids, where I had to figure out how to be friends with people again, something that I completely neglected. Like I didn't know how to maintain friendships and I didn't have good friendships because I'd been so locked in on what I was working on. And that's kind of just a reality of the path that I chose. And so to be here in this space and to be experiencing some weeks that were pretty rough and to be following the 9 to 5 schedule, to be going home at the end of the day. It's like, okay, the shop's winding down. I should probably go home. And it's like, it's hard to describe how good that feels to be able to leave work. That feels amazing. I like the idea of being able to work from wherever I want to with my laptop. Amazing. So good. But it also feels incredible to be able to clock out. That feels so good. And when I was stuck in a 10 by 10 foot cube, feeling like anytime I stepped out of my door, I was being a nuisance to everyone around me because they were just so annoyed with my presence in that space. That was so rough on me. Like if I was struggling to focus or struggling to get into an edit, I would just sit there and try. I would like unplug my internet and just stare at the computer and try to force myself to try. And that is the worst thing you could possibly do in that scenario. It's like, that's not how it works for me. My life needs to have a balance of stimulus. I need to be able to go on a walk. I need to be able to see some people. I need to be able to ride a bike. I need to be able to use my hands. I need to be able to go watch this video over in this room on my lunch break and then come back to the workstation. Like I need variety and novelty and different things happening. And that just was not present in my last scenario. And so being here in this space, I'm just so reveling in the fact, and I was telling Janelle this the other day, like it feels so good to be able to have a week where maybe I wasn't anywhere near as productive as I wanted to be, but that was okay because who I was in that space was still someone that I could feel okay about. So if I'm talking about stacking the deck against myself, locking myself in a room alone every day of the week, failing to perform at the major tasks I need to do, and then feeling bad about it, and then feeling bad that I'm feeling bad, and then disappointing people because weeks on weeks of that means I'm not getting things done. And it just feels so suffocating for who I am as a person that loves to create things. And I just was reflecting on how silly that was, that I thought it would work for me to be locked in a room away from people. And to give myself credit, I did not know early enough that it wasn't a co-work space. I thought that people would actually be co-working there, which is just simply not the case. It was just an office building with therapists. That's what it was. And they were certainly not interested in interacting with me. And I wanted interaction. So the offer from Dave came of moving in here, and I did, and we've got set up here. And this has been so healthy for me, and I'm getting so optimistic now about certain activities. So what do I think when we talk about like stacking the deck in your favor instead of working it against you? I don't even know if that's a good analogy, the stacking the deck thing, but that's what came to mind. So that's what we're gonna roll with. But how could I be working to make this experience better for me? Because some of my goals have been to create more educational style content, more tutorials, more walkthroughs, more teaching, more live teaching, more teaching in the Adventure Film Academy community. Like, I want to do more of that. And I want to be able to quickly do like a backpack walkthrough of how I packed my camera gear on a trip. And right now, if I was to do that before I moved into this place, I would need to set up an environment for me to film. So now we're talking multi-layered studio-esque things where I'm actually not just looking for a place that I can sit down and edit. I'm actually looking for a place where I could easily film things, where I can easily free flow into one activity from the other. And I need it to not be crazy expensive. Like, I can't rent a massive building. And that's where I'm just so relieved. Like right beside me, this, like, technically my space is right here where I am. If you're on the YouTube feed, you'll see it, Adventure Film Academy. Go subscribe. This is the space that's me. But in this collaborative environment, like, if there's nothing happening beside me, I'm allowed to film something there. And that is just, I can't tell you how helpful it is to have the cameras set up on tripods, have the lights set up, and just be able to turn them on and record something. Like, this is so elementary, right? Like, this is why people have YouTube studios. This is, and for me, for the longest time, that was the van, and that did work in a lot of ways, but it wasn't enough space to start recording and doing some of the walkthroughs and breakdowns that I want to be doing now into the future. So that is something that has been so exciting for me, is to have the camera gear set up and reduce the mental barriers to what it takes to hit record and start creating. And this is a principle that I've known for ages. I mean, I think I first learned this when I was like 19. And yet it's so funny to me how many of these lessons that I learned that I just have to keep relearning. It's like, yeah, it turns out it's way easier to make a video when your camera gear is already set up and you don't have to jump through all the mental hurdles of how you're going to do that. Specifically in this place, it's not perfect. So it's a working bike shop. So I actually can't really record during most work days. The shop is closed on Mondays. So that's going to become my main teaching day. So I'm going to do my main teaching on Mondays. That's where I'll record things like the Adventure Film Academy show. That's when our fall courses, when those start, that's where I'll be teaching out of here for those experiences. When we work on the editing course, like, all of that stuff can happen out of here on a Monday. And that's actually great for me. You want to know why? Because constraints are super helpful for my brain. If you tell me, Levi, you can make the video any day this week, guess which day I'm probably going to make it on? The last one, right? Like, I'm not going to make it the first day. I'm not going to make it the second day. Maybe the third day I'll start, but I'm not going to start in earnest until there's not much time left. So I have this hunch. I'm nervous that, oh no, I can't record every day of the week. That's going to be such a problem for me. I really don't think it is. I think as long as I can figure out how to get clean voiceovers, I don't actually need to be recording like the other day, I did a whole editing tutorial, mobile editing tutorial without any voiceover. And I just did the voiceover later. And that's actually a takeaway I've been having for that style of creating videos, that certain things I realized if I'm having to speak while I'm doing it, it just makes things so much more complicated. It is genuinely so much easier to just do it as voiceover later. And it's such a life hack for me these days to just do voiceover. So I'm thrilled. I'm pumped. If I have one day in the week, I think I can fit a lot into that day if I just have that constraint. It's such a superpower to say, you have to make this thing on this day of the week. When I was doing a weekly vlog, copying Casey, he was doing it daily. I was doing it weekly. It was a similar thing. Like if I tried to make the vlog across the whole week, that was actually really complicated and it made editing it really hard. But if I made the entire vlog in one day, a day has the structure of a story, beginning, middle, end, and it would force me to just make it in a day and it would go so much better. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Adventure Film Academy show. I would greatly appreciate it if you went over to Apple Podcasts and gave us a review, gave us give the people what you feel about the show. That helps other people know that this is something that's worth their time. So if you want to follow the feed on YouTube, do that. If you want to make your own things, do that. I will make a note to myself to plan on a better outro, because this ain't it. Like whatever this is, not it, but we got to start somewhere, right?